Supreme Commander Verox stood at the massive observation window aboard the Kian flagship Revenant, his four obsidian-black eyes fixed on the endless vista of stars. For centuries, the Kian Empire had reigned over 12 galaxies, conquering weaker species and absorbing their resources. As he gazed upon the void, he allowed himself a moment to remember how it had all begun. The triumphs, the stolen technologies, the unstoppable fleets. No conquest, however, had ever tasted as sweet as the one that had seemed within reach 1,000 years ago. Earth and its fledgling human civilization. The Kian had expected an easy victory then, but the humans had negotiated a treaty that promised 1,000 years of peace. The treaty was to protect the humans, so the Kian believed at the time, and now it had finally expired. Verox flexed the 6 tendrils protruding from his torso, each limb indicative of his rank and status. He recalled a time when the humans were barely capable of spaceflight. Their weapons had been laughably primitive, reliant on chemical propellants and nuclear fission warheads. Their medicine had required physically cutting bodies open, and their technology was quaint at best. The Kian Empire had viewed them as an oddity, not worth immediate conquest, yet valuable enough to coerce into signing a long-lasting armistice. They had demanded outrageous conditions in that treaty, including a mandated 5-light-year boundary around the Sol system. The Kian had graciously agreed, convinced that humans could never catch up or pose a threat worth any genuine concern. Now the 1,000-year peace was over, and the High Council expected Verox to lead the triumphant march into Earth's solar system. Pride coursed through his veins. The Kian had never been so prepared, so sure of their own invincibility. From the observation window, he could see the shimmering lights of thousands of warships arranged in a disciplined formation. All around them, the small glints of fighter escorts dotted the darkness. Fleet Admiral Sora had reported that the full muster of the Armada was complete. 100,000 capital ships, each one bristling with advanced plasma cannons, quantum lances, and swarms of fighter drones. He turned away from the window as Lieutenant Drev approached, his posture stiff with military formality. "Supreme Commander," Drev said, "intelligence reports that the humans have shown no signs of heightened defensive posture. Our long-range scans detect minimal activity at their outer planets." A faint sneer tugged at Verox's wide mouth. "They have grown complacent," he declared. 1,000 years is enough time to let fear fade from memory. They think we have forgotten them. They think we will not return. But we will show them how wrong they are. No one in the command chamber contested his words. Around him, in the gloom of the flagship's central hall, officers busied themselves with last-minute preparations. The Empire's triumphant return to Sol would be unstoppable, or so it seemed. Verox clasped his elongated fingers behind his back, recalling the day the High Council had summoned him to confirm the plan. They had said, "Conquer Earth, subdue the humans, re-establish the Kian supremacy in that region, bring back their resources, particularly the abundant metals and exotic elements rumored to be found near the edges of their system." He remembered the Council's words with clarity. "We will not be denied." Yet a single doubt still flickered in his mind. A millennia of forced separation might have given the humans unexpected time to grow. He dismissed the notion as paranoia. After all, humans had once been so far behind that even the gift of 10,000 years wouldn't let them match Kian capabilities. At least that was the prevailing opinion. He consoled himself with the knowledge that no intelligence reports had indicated humans had ventured far beyond their single star. They had stayed put, exactly as they were supposed to. Deep in the bowels of the Revenant, the drone foundries hummed, preparing entire squadrons of remote-controlled assault ships. Verox took pride in the technology they had seized from other conquests. The Kian Empire rarely invented anything original. They simply conquered those who did, repurposed the ideas, and improved upon them. It had worked for millennia without fail. He strode across the command deck, satisfied with the hum of readiness that filled the air. High Admiral Sora saluted him. "We are prepared to jump to FTL, Supreme Commander," she said. "The warp gates will open at your command." Verox gave a solemn nod. "Then let us begin." Set a course for Sol at maximum velocity. The humans must be reminded of their place. He paused, staring once more at the shimmering cosmos. And once we seize that planetoid with the resources we desire, they will kneel or burn. In unison, the officers and staff of the command deck responded, for Kian supremacy. Soon, the interior lights dimmed as the immense warship readied its faster-than-light engines. Outside, the entire armada aligned into a precise, glimmering array before the gates flared open. Light and space distorted, and within moments, the entire fleet slipped into the continuum jump. Admiral Tessa Monroe stood at the forward window of an Earth orbital station, letting the gentle hum of gravity stabilizers fill her ears. Beyond the transparent alloy, she saw not empty darkness, but the vibrant bustle of a system quietly preparing for war in the face of centuries of calm. She was short-haired, auburn locks trimmed close to her skull, her expression carrying a perpetual hint of amusement, as if she were in on a cosmic joke no one else had fully grasped. 1,000 years ago, her ancestors had negotiated the so-called peace treaty. Now it was time to see if all the preparations, all the hidden fortifications, would pay off. She turned from the window and addressed the assembled officers behind her, men, women, and synthetic humanoids. We've been watching them ever since they left, she began. Every snippet of data they've managed to transmit within the boundaries of that treaty, every rumor from the fringes of the galaxies they've conquered, we've collected. Our dear Kian friends think we've been stagnant, cowering in one star system. They have no idea what we've built in these centuries. A tall, lean man named General Okoro, heavily augmented with neural implants, nodded in agreement. I've run countless simulations, he said. By the time their armada arrives, we will be ready. The only question is how we present ourselves. Do we reveal everything we can do, or do we hold back? The mention of reveal everything made Tessa suppress a grin. Holding back had long been part of the plan. She remembered how her father had described it to her when she was still a cadet. A single-star system can be more than enough for a civilization that can harness every resource thoroughly and efficiently. We will see how they move, she replied simply. We don't need to launch a preemptive strike. They'll come to us, predictably outraged that we refuse to give them the mining rights to that lifeless rock at the edge of our system. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the transmissions from centuries of remote observation. The Kian believed humans were naive, primitive, stuck with the same old technology. She had watched them claim to blot out suns in other galaxies. She had also watched their methods, unstoppable only when faced with species that had never encountered such aggression or had fewer resources to develop advanced weaponry. Humanity, by contrast, had spent its 1,000-year reprieve dissecting advanced sciences in secret. Admiral Monroe motioned for a younger officer to step forward. This was Lieutenant Marion Sue, specialized in covert intelligence. Lieutenant, your watch post near Saturn's rings, report. The lieutenant straightened her posture. Everything remains in place, Admiral. Our concealment protocols are operating flawlessly. We estimate that once the Kian cross Neptune's orbit, they'll detect nothing more than standard system signals. There's no sign they realize how many drones and ships we have hidden in that ring structure. They've never sent probes near Saturn, at least none that we didn't intercept. General Okoro folded his arms. And the phase shift tech is fully operational? Yes, Lieutenant Sue confirmed. We ran the final tests last week. The quantum entanglement reactors are stable, and our AI controllers have run millions of simulations on Kian strategy. We're ready. Admiral Monroe let her gaze wander around the room, taking in the sense of quiet readiness etched on every face. She knew how crucial it was that Earth's defenders maintain absolute secrecy about the depth of their capabilities. When the Kian Armada arrived, the initial response from humanity would be calculated to provoke the Empire into revealing its arrogance once again. We'll make our official stance very clear, Monroe said. We will not let them pillage our outer colonies. But first, we let them speak, let them issue demands. Then, when they test us, we give them a small taste of our true might. She placed her hand on a console, bringing up a holographic representation of the solar system. Dots of light indicated hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of microfactories scattered everywhere, from Mercury's scorching orbit to the Kuiper Belt. Another set of commands highlighted the swarm of AI vessels stationed in places Kian would dismiss as floating debris, particularly around Saturn. And if they prove too stubborn to retreat? General Okoro asked. They might be. They're proud. They've spent millennia conquering smaller fish in a massive cosmic pond. Admiral Monroe paused, looking at each officer in turn. We stand ready. We show them that we're not the ones who need protection. But we also must remember, our true goal is not to destroy them. It's to ensure they understand that war with Earth is futile. We're preparing for something bigger, though we still don't have all the data on that something. Let's not lose sight of that. Another hush fell upon the room. Rumors had persisted for decades that Earth's deep space observatories had picked up anomalies in extragalactic regions, possibly signs of older, more formidable powers that neither the Kian nor humanity had fully recognized. Monroe turned off the holographic display and exhaled slowly. Let them come, she said. We'll do what must be done. Days later, the Kian armada appeared at the edge of the Sol system. The moment they emerged from their final jump, subspace rippled with the energy discharge of 100,000 warships. The gas giant Neptune loomed nearby, its bluish atmosphere offering a serene contrast to the menacing fleet. Supreme Commander Verox stood on the flagship's primary bridge, surveying the readouts. The scan result displayed a suspicious lack of defensive arrangements. There were no major Earth battleships out here, no sign of a fleet to meet them. He exchanged a glance with Fleet Admiral Sora. I expected them to send something, anything, to greet us. Sora's tendrils twitched. Perhaps they're cowering near their home planet. They might have advanced somewhat, but they remain within one system. It's foolish to assume they have not realized we were coming. She pointed to the holographic map, showing minimal signals. We do see some satellites around the major planets, but they appear standard, or outdated. Verox let out a sharp hiss that was the Kian equivalent of derisive laughter. Then we proceed inward. Once we pass Jupiter, we will hail them, demand their immediate surrender, and secure the resources we desire. Let's not draw this out. I tire of these humans and their arrogance. In the privacy of his own thoughts, Verox remembered the intelligence briefings that had arrived just before they set sail. There had been anomalies recorded in the Saturn region, something about the rings shifting in a manner inconsistent with gravitational norms. Yet no conclusive data had supported the idea that these were anything but typical cosmic debris fluctuations. Perhaps, he reasoned, humans had developed something akin to stealth technology. Still, nothing significant enough to best the Kian war machine. He shook off the nagging unease, unwilling to appear uncertain before his subordinates. On Earth, Admiral Monroe and her senior staff watched the real-time data scroll across their consoles. The Kian had entered the system and were moving inward. Sensor stations as far as Pluto's orbit confirmed the approximate size of the force. Easily 100,000 capital ships. An impressive sight, if the year were 1,000 or 2,000 or even 10,000 in the old Earth reckoning. Now, though, the human officers viewed that number with calm deliberation. Commander, they'll be at Saturn within a few days by their current speed, an ensign reported. So far, no sign they've detected our presence. Monroe folded her arms, leaning over the holographic map. Perfect. We'll send the first transmission when they cross the orbit of Uranus. We'll be polite. Let them do all the saber-rattling. She paused, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Then, if they still insist, we laugh. The memory of older transmissions from centuries ago flitted through her mind. The Kian had threatened Earth with extinction, boasting that they could blot out suns. The humans, with their then-limited means, had politely negotiated a treaty. Now, the roles were reversed, except this time, Earth was the side with the upper hand. The massive effort that had gone into forging humanity's defenses was no trivial accomplishment. For 1,000 years, Earth had accelerated its scientific research, driven by existential dread. The advent of quantum entanglement communications, advanced AI design, and matter conversion techniques had catapulted them centuries beyond any known competitor. The presence of the Kian was not a trivial threat, but it was a threat for which humanity had systematically prepared, bit by bit, day after day, generation after generation. "Let's make sure the defense grid around Saturn stands by," Monroe instructed. "The moment their scanners pick up anything unusual, we can let them think it's just debris. When they decide to engage, our forces will respond." In the corner of the command center, Dr. Jackson Webb, a quantum physicist, observed with quiet interest. He had played a crucial role in perfecting the phase shift technology that allowed remote-controlled ships to pass seamlessly through solid matter. It was Dr. Webb who had also helped harness vacuum energy fluctuations to produce the raw materials needed for Earth's secret armadas. Standing next to Monroe, he said in a hushed tone, "We should be mindful not to annihilate them outright. That would serve no purpose, except to sow hatred in whatever remains of the Empire. We want them to realize war with us is futile, and hopefully to open a path toward collaboration." Monroe's eyes flicked to Dr. Webb. She appreciated his empathy and sense of a bigger picture. "I haven't forgotten," she replied. "I only hope the Kian leadership will see reason once we demonstrate our capacity." Dr. Webb offered a small nod. "We've learned from them, ironically. Our entire impetus for growth was triggered by their initial threat so long ago. Without that impetus, we might have stayed complacent ourselves." The Admiral's gaze hardened. "Yes, the difference is we aren't interested in subjugating them. But let's see how they respond when faced with our real strength." As the Kian armada glided inexorably closer to Saturn, the tension aboard the Revenant grew. Finally, communications indicated a hail from Earth. Verox smirked, stepping onto the central dais. This was it. The humans would grovel, beg, or attempt some pathetic negotiation. Sora activated the view screen. An image of Admiral Tessa Monroe appeared. Her auburn hair was close-cropped, her eyes unsettlingly calm for someone supposedly facing certain doom. "Supreme Commander Verox, I presume," she said with a slight inclination of her head. "Your arrival is somewhat expected." Verox regarded her through the monitor, arching one ridged brow. "Expected," he hissed. "Then you know we have come to claim the resource-rich planetoid you so rudely refused to surrender, and to reassert the rightful superiority of the Kian Empire." Monroe pursed her lips as if suppressing a smile. "We do, and we invite you to reconsider. There's no need for aggression. We are more than capable of handling our own resources." Verox's eyes narrowed. Her casual demeanor grated on his pride. "You speak as though you have a choice. Surrender now, or we will bring fire to your worlds. Our fleets blot out suns. Our soldiers number in the trillions. We conquered dozens of civilizations across multiple galaxies. Do you truly think you can withstand the might of the Empire?" In response, Monroe allowed the faintest hint of laughter to escape. It wasn't forced or theatrical. It was as if she genuinely found the entire exchange amusing. "Supreme Commander," she said, "we have had 1,000 years to observe your progress and plan for this day. If you really want to test us, then by all means continue your approach. I only hope, for your sake, that you're prepared for the consequences." When the transmission ended, Verox's command crew looked aghast. One of the officers breathed, "They're laughing at us." A second tension-laden hush fell over the bridge. Verox's secondary heart thumped faster with each passing second, a primal sign of anger in the Kian physiology. He spun to face Fleet Admiral Sora. "We proceed," he snarled. "Bring all weapons to full readiness. Position our capital ships for an overwhelming strike the moment we close in. I will not abide such disrespect." Within hours, the Kian armada slipped into Saturn's orbit. They marveled at the planet's splendid rings, swirling with ice and rock that reflected the faint sunlight. Verox ordered scanners to sweep the area. At first, the data seemed routine, but then anomalies began popping up on every console. Sora's expression grew taut. Supreme Commander, the rings, they're moving, rearranging themselves in ways that defy natural orbital mechanics. Explain, Verox demanded. A flurry of data scrolled across the monitors. The chemical composition was different from what ancient Kian records indicated 1,000 years ago. Large segments of the rings were actively adjusting their position. Before anyone could process the implications, an urgent alarm blared. Ensign Orek shouted from a station, "We have signatures of ships, sir. Countless small craft emerging from the ring debris. There could be billions of them." Verox froze, straining to comprehend. Billions? That was absurd. He had expected a few hundred, maybe a few thousand. The best intelligence had suggested the humans had a small, but potentially advanced navy. But billions? They must be illusions, Fleet Admiral Sora whispered. Or decoys of some sort. Yet, even as she spoke, the sensors confirmed the reality. Each piece of debris was a cleverly disguised vessel, lightly armored but highly maneuverable, possibly autonomous. And now, they were all powering up. The communications officer spoke up. "Incoming transmission, sir. It's Admiral Monroe." The view screen flickered to life again. Monroe stood on what looked like a sleek, minimalist command deck, humming with advanced technology. "Welcome to Seoul, Supreme Commander," she said, voice bright and polite. "You've made it right on schedule. I see you've discovered our little surprise." Verox felt an unfamiliar chill coil around his hearts. "Impossible," he spat. "No species can produce so many ships." Monroe gave a shrug. "We used to build them by hand, yes, but that was centuries ago. Today, we automate the process. It only takes a few seconds to build one. Once you have enough factories, well, the numbers add up." In desperation, Verox gave a silent signal to his weapons officer. The Kian ships opened fire. 100,000 capital ships unleashed energy beams that would have shredded entire moons into dust. The vacuum of space erupted in an intense light show, streaks of brilliant plasma lancing across the rings. For a moment, it seemed unstoppable. Then the humans' hidden vessels moved as one, weaving effortlessly through the onslaught. Not a single shot found its mark. They flew in tight arcs that defied Kian calculations, their AI reflexes and advanced propulsion outpacing everything the Empire had ever encountered. Monroe's voice crackled over the speakers again. "You seem determined to do this the hard way. If that's your choice, we won't stop you." Her tone was almost regretful. Then, at her command, a mere fraction of those hidden ships, perhaps 1,000 out of the billions, surged forward. They converged on several Kian capital ships and simply passed through their defensive screens. Verox watched in mounting horror as the human crafts phased directly through the hulls. Within seconds, those Kian vessels disintegrated, unraveling into molecular clouds. The scene was unreal, like a nightmare come to life. An oppressive stillness seized the Kian bridge. No one spoke for a long, agonizing moment. The data readouts on the destroyed ships scrolled, each line more incomprehensible than the last. Finally, Verox let out a trembling breath. "All ships," he commanded softly, "pull back. Pull back now." He was met with wide-eyed shock, but no one dared protest. The armada began to retreat, drifting away from Saturn. Millions of human craft stayed in formation, watching with a disturbing stillness that suggested they could wipe out the Kian forces at any moment. Monroe's face returned to the view screen. "Supreme Commander Verox," she said with formal calm, "we offer you an alternative. Withdraw your forces and sign a renewed peace treaty. Let's make it 10,000 years this time, or face total destruction." The words cut deeper than any weapon. The Kian language didn't even have a proper term for retreat. It was generally phrased as strategic repositioning for future conquest. A humiliating concept, but it was their only hope. Verox's pride warred with his survival instinct. He had never encountered a foe so technologically advanced. In a stunned silence, he gave the necessary orders. Fall back to a safe distance. Cease all aggression. When the battered Kian fleet retreated from Seoul, it took them months to return to Kian space. The entire journey was marked by shame, a silence broken only by brief communications confirming that the unstoppable human swarm was not pursuing them. Back on the homeworld, Verox found the High Council in a state of disbelief. The old Counselor Hrax demanded answers with a trembling voice, for unblinking eyes fixed on Verox. You mean to say they destroyed 20 of our capital ships in seconds? Verox nodded wearily, describing the humans' phase shift technology, their trillion-strong armies of autonomous vessels, their ability to produce ships at will, and that terrifying sense of ease with which they had done it. The council members listened, some scoffing, some growing pale, others furious that Verox had turned back. But the data was incontrovertible. Even the greatest hawks among them couldn't deny the evidence from the Armada's flight recorders. At the end of Verox's testimony, Hrax steepled his slender fingers. We have grown stagnant, the counselor admitted in a hushed tone. We have advanced primarily by looting the inventions of those we conquer. But now, we face a civilization that far surpasses us. Did they say why they simply allowed us to leave? Verox stared at the polished floor, recalling Admiral Monroe's words. They claim there are far greater threats in the cosmos than even they can handle alone. They told us that war with them would be pointless, that they'd prefer if we turned our efforts to something more constructive. They even suggested we might one day unite to face a common danger. An uneasy muttering spread through the council. Verox couldn't blame them. The Kian mindset was centuries steeped in conquest. Their pride was battered, and they now stood at a crossroads: evolve or remain defiant and risk annihilation. Amid this debate, a sudden announcement came through the central hall. The guards opened the chamber doors, revealing a lone human stepping into the council chamber. He was tall, dark-skinned, wearing simple attire, and carrying a small device that pulsed with gentle blue light. Gasps erupted from the counselors. How had one human come this far, bypassing Kian security? Verox felt a chill of recognition. He had read the reports about Dr. Jackson Webb. Indeed, it was him, an individual rumored to be at the forefront of Earth's quantum leaps. Without a hint of fear, Webb approached the dais, meeting Verox's gaze. I come with an offer, Dar, Webb said calmly, addressing the council. The guards, initially stepping forward to detain him, froze under the sign of the Arch-Counselor. Hrax gestured for him to speak. We can continue this as an arms race, if you wish, Webb explained. But humanity sees no purpose in subjugating or annihilating the Kian. We believe in mutual progress, given that we have a bigger threat on the horizon. So I bring you this. He held up the glowing device, no larger than a standard data crystal. It contains the complete scientific history of humankind, from our earliest discoveries to our most groundbreaking theories. We withheld only our advanced weapon schematics. Everything else, energy manipulation, phase shift basics, matter conversion, computational leaps, medical breakthroughs, we're giving it to you. Shocked silence gripped the chamber. Counselor Hrax voiced the stunned question on everyone's mind. Why would you do this? Dr. Webb's features softened. Because after 1,000 years of focusing inward, we've realized we risk intellectual stagnation if we remain unchallenged. Competition, or at least collaboration with a similarly advanced civilization, will drive us both further. And we suspect we'll both need that edge when we encounter the Watchers in the void beyond what either of us knows. Verox recalled how Monroe had hinted at Watchers, beings more ancient, more powerful. Could that really be true? The Kian had never seen anything more advanced than themselves until the humans. Now, it seemed plausible there might be others out there who eclipsed even Earth's capabilities. The council murmured in confusion and curiosity. Dr. Webb continued. We propose we open a new form of treaty, not the old separation, but a partnership of knowledge. Let us share scientific knowledge. Let us build trust by small steps. And eventually, we may stand side by side against whatever else lurks in the cosmic dark. The High Council's debate stretched long into the night. The old ways demanded punishment for Verox, who had retreated. Others recognized a change was needed, or the empire would collapse upon itself. In the end, the majority concluded that the humans' demonstration of power, and the gift now offered, was too monumental to dismiss. Verox wasn't executed. Instead, he was charged with implementing the strategic realignment for future preservation, a clumsy phrase that effectively meant stop conquering and start learning. Sometime later, Verox accompanied Dr. Webb to a newly established research station on the outskirts of the Kian homeworld. It was a modest facility for now, staffed by a mix of curious Kian scientists and a handful of humans who had arrived on a small Earth ship. Like seeds of a new era, these individuals represented two species bridging the gulf between them, forging an unlikely partnership. As they walked through the station's corridors, Dr. Webb explained how Earth had once faced near disaster 1,000 years ago. When your empire threatened us, we realized fear alone wouldn't save us. So we pushed ourselves to learn faster than anyone thought possible. Verox listened quietly. He imagined how humiliating it must have been for humans back then, signing a treaty to keep the Kian away while they raced against time, terrified that if the Empire returned too soon, humanity would be lost. He realized that same fear had spurred Earth to unimaginable heights. The Kian, in contrast, had grown complacent, stealing technology from weaker species who rarely had anything advanced enough to rival them. And now we find ourselves behind, Verox murmured, behind a species that once cut open bodies to heal them. The irony stings. Dr. Webb gave a gentle, understanding smile. I know it's difficult to accept. Your empire has accomplished incredible feats of conquest. But that kind of approach eventually hit a ceiling. We discovered that necessity is the mother of invention. We needed to surpass you, so we did. Now, we invite you to surpass us in turn, or at least to walk alongside us. Because we can't afford to be at odds when the real threats reveal themselves. Together, they entered a laboratory where Kian scientists were examining the matter conversion device Dr. Webb had brought. One of the Kian lead researchers, a tall female named Corel, greeted them with cautious optimism. In our initial tests, Corel said, we have confirmed that this process defies the conventional conservation of mass and energy as we understand it. You're tapping into vacuum energy fluctuations to manifest matter. It's extraordinary. Dr. Webb chuckled. We had centuries to refine it. Believe me, we still find it extraordinary ourselves. But keep in mind, we shared only the basics. The fine details will take years to master. Corel's eyes glowed with fascination. That's more than enough to begin. Verox, watching, felt an unfamiliar warmth. Perhaps it was hope. Hope that the Kian Empire could transcend the brutal cycle of conquest and learn to truly innovate. He also felt relief. If a species like humanity, once beneath their notice, could achieve so much, maybe the Kian could do the same. He recalled the immediate threat the humans had posed at Saturn, the destructive ease with which they obliterated Kian ships. It was frightening. Yet here they were exchanging scientific knowledge and forging new paths. Months passed, and tensions gradually lessened. Back on Earth, Admiral Monroe oversaw the next phase of communications with Kian leadership. Officially, both sides were still uneasy. The Kian had to quell dissent among those who believed retreat was treason. The humans had to maintain vigilance, trusting that the Empire wouldn't resume hostilities in a fit of wounded pride. But Dr. Webb's mission on Kian Prime planted seeds of mutual respect. Slowly, tidbits of information on Kian hyperlane technology and assimilation tactics found their way back to Earth. Meanwhile, more humans arrived on Kian Prime to help unravel quantum entanglement power grids. Exchanges continued in carefully structured increments, neither side fully trusting the other yet. In a heavily secured chamber on Kian Prime, Verox confronted the High Council once more. This time, he had a bold proposal. We must not only learn from humanity's science, but share our own specialized knowledge in return. Our infiltration tactics, our ship design, some aspects of our technology might intrigue them. They have advanced beyond us in many areas, but we can still offer unique insights. An alliance is possible if we are willing. A hush followed. Then Counselor Hrax spoke gently. You speak of forging an alliance with those who humiliated us on the battlefield. Are we truly prepared to set aside our pride? Verox bowed his head. Pride will not shield us from their phase-shift weapons, nor will it protect us from whatever lurks in the cosmic darkness. If we have learned anything, it is that stagnation dooms us. Back in Sol, Admiral Monroe found herself in a similarly delicate position. Rumors spread through Earth's population about the unstoppable Kian Empire returning. That rumor, followed by the abrupt retreat, perplexed many. Some humans demanded that Earth launch a punitive strike to ensure the Kian never returned. Monroe shot down such proposals. We stand on the cusp of a new era, she reminded them in a broadcast. We must not let fear or vengeance guide us. The Kian have stepped back. Now it's time to see if we can guide them forward, as they once forced us to evolve. Still, the shadow of the Watchers remained. Dr. Webb had discovered anomalies in deep space beyond the furthest known Kian conquests. There were regions where physics bent in bizarre ways, where entire star clusters disappeared from standard observational data. Monroe conferred with Earth's top astrophysicists and secret divisions tasked with mapping those sectors. The more they observed, the more alarmed they became. Faint signals teased that something older and more advanced than either Kian or human existed. If they find us fighting each other like children, she remarked during a closed-door meeting, they'll see us as easy prey. Or they might not care at all, merely treating us as cosmic debris in their path. Time passed. In an unannounced visit, Admiral Monroe herself traveled to Kian Prime, aboard a single, unarmed diplomatic vessel. She had half expected hostility upon arrival, but the greeting was polite, almost reverent. Verox came to meet her in the docking bay, a tense air of uncertainty between them. She stepped out, offered a slight bow. "Thank you for allowing me here," she said, glancing around the massive structure, noticing how Kian architecture favored grandeur. Verox responded stiffly, "We do not wish to fight you, Admiral, if that is your concern." Monroe eyed him thoughtfully, recalling the intimidation she had once felt at the thought of Kian conquest. Now, she only felt a measure of sympathy. "I know. Our conflict at Saturn was, well, it was necessary to prove a point. But that doesn't mean we want to remain enemies." They walked through the corridors, eventually arriving in a council chamber filled with high-ranking Kian officials. Tensions flared, but the presence of Dr. Webb and several Kian scientists who had grown intrigued by Earth's data introduced a sense of cautious optimism. Monroe laid out a new treaty proposal. No longer a forced peace, but a collaborative arrangement where both species would share knowledge, at least in non-military domains. She explained that Earth was prepared to expand the accord over time if the Kian reciprocated with genuine partnership. The council conferred in hushed tones. Their society had never had a true ally, only subjugated states. This was an entirely new paradigm. Counselor Hrax, after many deliberations, spoke. "We are prepared to sign a preliminary pact of non-aggression and open scientific exchange. We will keep our armies at bay. You will do the same. Neither of us will forcibly encroach upon the other's territory or property," Verox added. "And in the future, we may discuss further cooperation, especially if what you say about these Watchers is true." Monroe nodded, a relieved smile forming. "We assure you, the Watchers are not a fabrication. We have data that suggests a confrontation with them or some other cosmic force might be inevitable, perhaps in a few centuries. If we are still at war with each other by then, we'll be easy pickings." The atmosphere in the chamber shifted like a collective exhale. Though it would take years, maybe decades, for trust to solidify, at least the first step was taken. Humanity had forcibly changed the Kian perspective simply by surviving and outpacing them. And the Kian, with all their size and existing dominion over 12 galaxies, found themselves humbled yet not extinguished. A chance to grow beyond conquest now lay before them. When the official signing was done, Monroe prepared to depart. Dr. Webb remained on Kian Prime, continuing his scientific exchange. Before she boarded her shuttle, she turned to Verox. "Supreme Commander," she said softly, "you once threatened Earth with extinction." We responded by laughing, and then demonstrating how foolish that threat was. "But we do not seek your annihilation. We want you to stand with us in the future. Let the memory of our battle at Saturn remind us all of what we can achieve when driven by fear, but also how we might channel that same drive into unity." Verox didn't sneer or bristle at her. Instead, he bowed his head. "I acknowledge your strength," he said. "I acknowledge Earth's wisdom as well. Perhaps we can learn a different path, one that does not revolve solely around conquest." Monroe offered a smile, turned, and walked up the ramp into her ship. Verox watched as the doors sealed and the engines glowed. For a moment, he felt the hollow pang of lost pride. But then, he was struck by something else, an ember of curiosity, reminiscent of what young Kian felt when they first glimpsed the stars. He realized that, for the first time in centuries, the Kian Empire had an open horizon before it, free of arrogance. They could transform, or they could perish clinging to old ways. He turned away from his shuttle bay and made his way to the newly formed Earth Kian Research Annex. Inside, Kian scientists huddled around human devices, analyzing designs that could revolutionize agriculture, medicine, energy. Earth delegates looked with fascination at Kian star charts that spanned galaxies. The chatter of scientific discourse mingled in the corridors, bridging two worlds that had so recently faced off in mortal combat. This was the future the humans had offered them. Verox still found it daunting, but for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that the Empire's greatest achievements might lie not in subjugation, but in genuine discovery. In his personal quarters, Verox replayed the final moments of the Saturn encounter in his mind. The flashes of unstoppable human technology, the swirl of their ephemeral ships, the monstrous power that dwarfed his entire armada. He remembered the laughter of Admiral Monroe and the simultaneous blend of confusion and frustration he had felt. Now, that laughter was a haunting motif urging him forward. It spoke of confidence, knowledge, and acceptance that fear alone did not decide victory. Maybe that was the hidden strength of humanity, this willingness to face the impossible with an almost flippant grin honed by centuries of existential fear. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. The crisis with Earth was over for now, yet they all knew it was merely the beginning of a much larger story. The Watchers in the Void, the twisted spaces between galaxies, these were greater concerns on the horizon. If the Kian had to stand a chance against such unknowns, they would need more than stolen science. They would need unity with a partner who shared their desire to survive. It was humbling, yes, but also liberating. There was no longer a single path forward, a forced march of conquest. There was at last a choice. Several weeks later, in the quiet dawn on Kian Prime, DR, Webb led a small group of human and Kian researchers out onto an observation platform high above the planet's capital. Towering spires rose all around them, testaments to the Empire's centuries of building a civilization upon the spoils of war. The sky glowed faintly red, a signature of the atmosphere's unique composition. As they gazed at the skyline, DR, Webb spoke to Carell. "I used to imagine what your cities looked like 1,000 years ago, back when we first encountered each other. I suspect they were already marvelous." Carell nodded, her face unreadable. "Marvelous, perhaps, but anchored by imperial hubris. We expanded outward, claiming everything we touched. That was our sense of self, unstoppable conquerors." DR, Webb folded his arms. "And now?" She let out a soft, clicking sound that approximated a laugh. "Now, unstoppable or not, we have been stopped, or at least put on pause. It's unsettling, but also exhilarating. Your kind has brought us the first true challenge in eons." He smiled. "Let's hope it's not the last. I don't want to imagine a universe where no one rises to the occasion. Our partnership is only beginning, and I think it might define both our species for centuries to come." Carell cast her eyes to the sky, where the faint silhouette of a small Earth ship passed overhead, escorted by Kian drones. the symbol of a fragile alliance, yet an alliance that could, in time, become something formidable. For centuries, she echoed, "Yes, perhaps this is how we avoid stagnation. Perhaps this is how we evolve." Dr. Webb drew in a breath of the warm, alien air. Admiral Monroe said something similar, that only by facing each other and, eventually, bigger threats do we break our old boundaries. The Watchers, or whoever they are, might be beyond anything we can currently face alone. Carell's expression turned thoughtful. Then let us not face them alone. Humans and Kian side by side. I never thought I would say those words. She paused, letting the magnitude of it sink in. Your Supreme Commander must be wrestling with the same realization. Dr. Webb nodded, recalling Verox's stoic reaction at the Saturn conflict. He's proud, but he's also pragmatic. He saw firsthand what we can do. I think part of him is relieved he didn't sacrifice his entire fleet that day. A lesser commander might have insisted on fighting to the bitter end. Instead, he stepped back, and that took a certain courage, ironically. Carell exhaled softly. Courage to defy our own history, yes. We Kian do not have a word that perfectly translates to retreat, but perhaps we need to create one for this new era. As the platform ascended even higher, Dr. Webb thought of Earth, thought of Saturn, and the dazzling ballet of concealed warships. He thought of the centuries of fear that had propelled humans to such dizzying heights of innovation. Maybe that fear would one day recede, replaced by something more constructive, like a shared mission with the Kian, or even more species if they too evolved. For now, at least, the guns had fallen silent between the Empire and Earth. The 1,000-year peace might have ended, but it had ushered in a new kind of peace, an uneasy and fragile one, yet brimming with possibility. By the time night fell over Kian Prime, Verox emerged on a balcony of the palace to watch the stars. He saw a shimmer where once he would have perceived emptiness, imagining Earth's quantum probes scanning the system even now, just as Kian spies might be venturing near Sol under newly negotiated terms. He placed both sets of arms behind his back, mindful of the symbolic weight of his position. The Watchers, the unknown threat in the cosmic wilderness. He wondered if humans knew more than they were letting on, or if they too were groping in the dark. In either case, the Kian could not afford to wage war on Earth and remain blind to the bigger danger. The memory of Monroe's laughter still echoed in his mind. It had once filled him with rage, with the sense of being mocked. Now it stirred a desire for knowledge, for understanding how that simple gesture could encapsulate all that humans had achieved. He felt a sense of awe for the species that had driven itself to mastery of cosmic energies. If they could do it, perhaps the Kian could as well, if they harnessed their ambition in a new way. Conquest had run its course. Creation lay ahead, standing there, on the cusp of a dawn that promised uncertain challenges and even more uncertain alliances. Verox inhaled the crisp evening air and let his eyes wander across the star-filled sky. For a brief, exhilarating instant, he imagined the Kian Empire no longer as a conqueror, but as an equal partner among interstellar powers, forging a path of cooperation rather than dominion. He imagined joint fleets of Earth and Kian vessels traveling to the outer galaxies, each side contributing its unique strengths, prepared to meet whatever cosmic force lurked. The future stretched out, uncharted, every bit as mysterious as the Watchers themselves. In that vision, he saw humans standing side by side with Kian, no longer a threat to each other's existence. The 1,000-year peace was over, but what replaced it might prove far more meaningful, should both sides have the courage and wisdom to walk that path. And, in a whispered vow carried on the warm alien breeze, Supreme Commander Verox promised himself and his empire that their next 1,000 years would be defined not by war alone, but by an evolution beyond anything the Kian had ever imagined possible. Captain Jamie Sloan stood on a gravel road that bisected a once thriving farmland on the outskirts of what used to be a bustling city. 2 years had passed since the Astorians had first appeared in Earth skies, and unleashed an onslaught that left entire countries reeling. Although their occupation had abruptly ended when they withdrew for reasons nobody fully understood, the scars they left behind were both physical and psychological. From Jamie's vantage point, the sun dipped low on the horizon, bathing the ruins of old barns and shattered wind turbines in a coppery glow. Fragments of the past lay scattered across the landscape. Rusted tractors, collapsed silos, fields grown wild with weeds. She pressed her lips into a tight line, remembering the chaos from 2 years ago. She had been a member of a special operations unit then, one that delivered desperate raids against Asterian ground patrols. Their sudden retreat had come as a shock. Everyone wanted to believe the danger was gone, but Jamie had never let go of the nagging feeling that they might return. That evening, Jamie drove to the nearest functioning military base, an international reconstruction facility that had been set up as part of a cooperative effort among several nations. The base was understaffed and underfunded, with most world leaders channeling resources into rebuilding hospitals, cities, and roads. A global recession had followed the first Asterian incursion, forcing governments to make tough choices. Brigadier Alex Monroe, an old acquaintance of Jamie's, had taken charge of the local defense forces. He was a tall, wiry man with a streak of gray in his hair that had not been there before the war. He greeted her in the makeshift command center, a large prefabricated building lined with monitors and half-repaired radio equipment. His uniform bore the insignia of an international coalition, a symbol of how the world had tried, and mostly failed, to unite fully during the last invasion. Over cups of burnt coffee from the base commissary, Monroe updated Jamie on the day's developments. The conversation started with normal military chatter, soldiers rotating out short supply lines, the endless bureaucracy of reconstruction. But then his tone shifted. A few hours earlier, a coastal radar station had picked up an abnormal reading off the Atlantic. At first, the staff on duty believed it to be a glitch. Such malfunctions were common because the station had not been properly maintained for months. However, an odd pattern repeated 3 times, each lasting only a few seconds before disappearing from the screen. They had filed a low-priority report, but Monroe recognized the intervals as suspicious. He believed it could be a sign of cloaked vessels or advanced technology that Earth's battered systems still struggled to detect. Most officers dismissed it as noise. Jamie listened, her heart heavy with a mix of dread and vindication. She, too, suspected the Astorians might still be lurking somewhere. Nobody had found a conclusive explanation for their abrupt departure. Though they had inflicted massive damage, they had left behind only small fragments of their technology. Some are found in crashed scout ships, others in abandoned outposts. Scientists and engineers around the world, including one of Jamie's contacts, Emily Katsura, had spent the past year scrutinizing these fragments to glean any advantage, but breakthroughs were minimal. The Astorians were eons ahead in propulsion, communications, and possibly genetic manipulation. Rumors had circulated that they'd used a biological agent in the first invasion, though it was never confirmed. Hearing about the radar anomaly brought Jamie no comfort. She rose from her chair, telling Monroe she needed to see it for herself. Late that night, she and a small team boarded a rickety helicopter, heading out toward the neglected radar station along the coast. They arrived to find a skeleton crew, half of them dozing off in front of dim console screens. The lead technician, a weary-eyed man in a uniform that didn't quite fit, showed Jamie the raw data from earlier in the day. Indeed, there were distinct traces of what seemed like a stealthy aircraft, one not matching any known Earth signature. Sifting through the logs, Jamie confirmed that the pattern repeated briefly, as if something tested the radar, then vanished. Troubled by the evidence, she made a direct call to Emily Katsura, who now worked at a research lab in a rebuilt section of the city. Emily was widely regarded as one of the few who had successfully reverse-engineered even the smallest Asterian communications device. She possessed a sharp mind and a knack for connecting disjointed data points. Over the phone, Jamie explained the suspicious readings and sent over the digital logs. Emily promised to run them through her own software, first thing in the morning, cautioning that they might not be definitive proof of Asterian presence. Still, the conversation ended with a mutual, unspoken acknowledgement. This was too close to what they had seen 2 years ago. The following afternoon, Emily called back in a rush. She had combed through the radar data and found encoded pulses that bore a striking resemblance to earlier Asterian communication signals. The intervals were arranged in a pattern that Earth forces had never used, and none of the standard encryption methods explained them. Her voice, usually calm, carried an edge of excitement and anxiety. If the signals were indeed Asterian, it confirmed what Jamie had suspected all along. They were back, or perhaps they had never really left. Immediately, Jamie relayed Emily's findings to Monroe, who escalated it up the chain of command. But the global political climate remained fractious. Some world leaders were unwilling to believe another attack was imminent. The official stance in many countries was that Earth should focus on economic recovery and that the last invasion was a one-time fluke. Refusing to wait for an official mobilization, Jamie and Monroe arranged a reconnaissance mission. They wanted to locate any physical proof. If they could capture one piece of Asterian tech actively transmitting signals, it might unify the major powers behind a renewed global defense effort. So, with minimal fanfare, Jamie led a small team on a covert trip to a mountainous region halfway across the world, where Emily's analyses showed the faint signal had briefly pinged again. After a grueling journey through rough terrain, they stumbled upon wreckage that looked suspiciously alien. Twisted metal shards, small mechanical modules, charred soil. Eerily, no signs of life were present. But Jamie noticed footprints, elongated impressions in the earth, each step placed at intervals too large to be human. Something had been there recently. While the team collected fragments, they were ambushed by a group of silent attackers clad in dark, seamless suits. Their physiques were human-like, but their movements were unnaturally fast, and their eyes glinted with an otherworldly sheen. It took only a few seconds for Jamie to realize these were Astorians or perhaps a specialized strike force. Gunfire erupted in the narrow canyon, muzzle flashes illuminating the rocky walls. Jamie took a grazing shot to her arm as she dove behind an outcropping. One of her teammates went down, groaning in pain. The team scrambled to protect the wounded, returning fire with disciplined precision. Their bullets chipped rocks and occasionally met Asterian flesh, but the enemy retaliated with handheld beams that melted stone into liquid globs. Though outnumbered, the Astorians suddenly withdrew, vanishing into the shadows. The encounter lasted under 2 minutes, but it left Jamie's team rattled. They had wanted proof, and now they had it. A brutal confirmation that Astorians walked the earth once more. Bleeding and shaken, Jamie ordered an immediate evac. Despite their injuries, they managed to collect some of the alien shards, including a small cylindrical device that pulsed with faint blue light. Back at the base, Emily insisted on studying it. The next day, she pulled Jamie aside with an urgent discovery. The device contained references to something she called Agent X, a possible code name or scientific compound. Preliminary chemical analysis showed traces of engineered pathogens. All speculation pointed to a new, far more insidious plan than a conventional takeover. Alarm shot through the command center as Monroe and Jamie explained the findings to officers from various nations. Some were unconvinced. After all, the global population had barely recovered from the economic shock, and the first Asterian invasion had not employed large-scale biological warfare, at least not publicly. They assumed if there had been a plan for a mass biological strike, the Astorians would have used it back then. Emily disagreed. She presented them with lab results that suggested the pathogen was incomplete 2 years ago, that the Astorians might have needed more time to perfect it. Now it was close to deployment. The device she studied carried data that implied an upcoming planetary-scale operation using satellites or some global distribution network. If Earth's governments didn't act, people might suffer a devastation they had never seen. Diplomatic tension rose. Monroe tried to coordinate with the newly formed Earth Security Council, But the majority of nations worried about false alarms, about sinking more money into defense. Jamie's voice trembled with frustration as she reminded everyone that the Astorians had never truly been beaten. They had only left. Now that they were here again, and better prepared, ignoring the threat was suicidal. Meanwhile, Emily refined her analyses and discovered an embedded reference to multiple orbiting platforms. These platforms would apparently release Agent X into the atmosphere once the final command was given. If that happened, entire regions could be infected in days. It took a near disaster to change the political narrative. Another radar outpost in East Asia reported not one, but two high-altitude disturbances. Scrambled jets were sent to investigate but failed to get a visual. The unusual flight patterns, combined with the intelligence about a potential orbiting platform, finally pushed hesitant leaders to call an emergency session of the Earth Security Council. Suddenly, satellites were retasked to scan for stealth anomalies in Earth's orbit. The findings were sobering. Faint shadows orbiting at altitudes that matched the old Astorian approach. They seemed few in number, less than half a dozen, but their presence was undeniable. Earth's governments could no longer remain in denial. In a massive virtual conference, representatives from over 100 countries saw the satellite data, listened to the accounts from Jamie's mission, and reviewed Emily's analysis of Agent X. At last, a unified resolution was passed to mobilize a planet-wide alert level. Reserves were called up, special operations units were reactivated, and a directive, codenamed Operation Iron Shield, was hastily drawn up. Its goals were explicit: to locate and neutralize any ground-based distribution points, to destroy or disable the orbiting platforms, and to prevent a catastrophic release of Agent X. But the plan was more complicated than anything Earth's fractured militaries had attempted. Many officers spoke of the risk. If anyone attacked the platforms prematurely, it could trigger a failsafe that released the pathogen. If they delayed too long, the Astorians might quietly finish preparations. Amid the heightened tension, Emily received a clandestine signal through one of the Astorian frequencies. Initially, she believed it was a hacking attempt. But after days of back-and-forth code decryption, she realized it was a message from someone identifying themselves as an Astorian dissident. They claimed to be a junior intelligence officer working under the command of a figure called Narthis, who oversaw the creation of Agent X. The message was a warning. The Real plan stretched beyond mere biological warfare. The Astorians aimed to transform Earth into a resource hub for their empire, wiping out humanity or mutating it if that was more convenient. To confirm the claim, Emily asked for verifiable data. The messenger provided partial coordinates of hidden labs scattered in remote corners of the globe. Jamie, Monroe, and Emily decided to gamble on this lead. They organized a small team to investigate one of these coordinates in a remote high-altitude desert. After a dangerous trek on muddy roads and rock-strewn passes, they arrived at a location that looked like nondescript wasteland. But deeper into a canyon, half concealed by jagged rock formations, sat a secret compound. The night sky was clear, revealing bright stars and a faint shimmer of satellite movements overhead. By scanning with specialized instruments, the team discovered that parts of the terrain were artificially disguised. Tunnels extended underground, and an electronic perimeter kept out curious locals. Carefully, the team penetrated the perimeter, using drones to map out corridors. Confirmation came swiftly. The site housed vats of liquid that, according to Emily's portable analyzer, contained precursors for Agent X. Astorians in protective gear moved around, occasionally barking orders in their guttural language. Despite the temptation to destroy the facility immediately, Jamie held back. They needed concrete proof to persuade the rest of the Earth Security Council that the threat was no longer theoretical. Silently, they recorded footage of Astorian scientists and soldiers at work. Once done, they placed remote sensors and retreated. On the way out, they encountered a patrol. Gunfire erupted again in the dusty desert night. The muzzle flashes lit the rocks like bursts of lightning. Jamie's heart pounded as bullets whistled overhead. Outnumbered and outgunned by advanced weaponry, the team retreated behind large boulders, using night vision scopes and carefully aimed shots to whittle down the patrol. Before more reinforcements arrived, they slipped away under cover of darkness, sensors in place to track the compound's ongoing activities. Back at the main base, the data they brought was incontrovertible. It showed large-scale production of a bioweapon, proof that the Astorians had been covertly stationed on Earth all along. The footage of the subterranean labs, the specialized equipment, and the planning documents made even the most reluctant council members accept the new reality. Operation Iron Shield was declared fully active. Warships, aircraft, satellites, and ground units were reorganized for coordinated strikes. The blueprint was to first jam Astorian communications, making it difficult for them to activate the orbiting platforms, then strike the ground labs, and finally deal with the satellites. But there was a catch. If the Astorians realized they were compromised, they might skip all proper protocols and release the pathogen at once. Speed and precision would be paramount. Pressure soared within Earth's strategic circles. People worried that an overly aggressive approach might seal humanity's doom. Jamie became a leading voice in the intelligence briefings, emphasizing the complexity of a group that thought in ways Earth was still struggling to understand. The Astorians had advanced technology, but they adhered to a rigid chain of command. If that chain was severed, or if key individuals were eliminated, their operations tended to stall. She proposed a direct infiltration to the nerve center of the operation, rumored to be commanded by Narthis, the official responsible for refining Agent X. If Narthis were taken down, and if Earth's forces simultaneously sabotaged their distribution infrastructure, the entire plan could collapse. The infiltration mission fell to Jamie, who volunteered wholeheartedly. She assembled a team of elite specialists from different nations, snipers from Eastern Europe, recon experts from Southeast Asia, and a demolitions crew from North America. Meanwhile, Emily Katsura stayed at the main control center to provide real-time updates and handle electronic warfare. On a tense, moonless night, Jamie's team inserted via stealth aircraft into a remote region rumored to be Narthis's base. Satellite intelligence revealed a sprawling jungle dotted with unusual clearings that defied local topography. Those clearings, presumably, were hidden landing zones for Astorian crafts. The mission demanded they arrive undetected, set charges on critical communications arrays, and confront Narthis in his fortress-like command center. Sweat trickled down Jamie's face as they crept through the dense foliage, each member weighed down by gear. The occasional whir of insect life was almost soothing, except for the knowledge that advanced motion sensors likely surrounded them. At the heart of this stronghold, they found a wide clearing filled with structures that glowed faintly in alien hues. Pulses of green and blue along the edges, reminiscent of organic architecture. Overhead, the stars were blotted out by the thick canopy, but every so often they caught a glimpse of the sky, where the Astorian satellites lurked. They moved in carefully, placing shaped charges along large antenna arrays that jutted from the treetops. These arrays, Emily suspected, connected with the orbiting platforms. Once the charges were set, they inched toward the biggest structure, its walls swirling with alien patterns. Inside, they discovered row upon row of cylindrical containers, each labeled with the Astorian script. The air smelled like chemicals and something vaguely sweet. In a control room bristling with monitors, they saw a tall, imposing figure with copper-hued skin and elongated features. By every account, this had to be Narthis. He wore an ornate uniform, and the way he carried himself exuded confidence, even arrogance. Under the glowing screens, his silhouette cut a sinister form. The team spread out, ready to strike, but Narthis sensed the intrusion. Alarms blared in an alien timbre. Astorian guards poured into the corridors, forcing Jamie's team to fight in cramped hallways. The air filled with smoke and the ozone tang of laser-like weaponry. Sparks rained from overhead fixtures. Jamie led from the front, years of experience guiding her every step. She tossed flashbang grenades that disoriented the guards, while her team capitalized on the advantage. The fighting was fierce, short bursts of gunfire merging with energy beams. Once the dust and smoke settled, they found themselves in the heart of the command room, Narthis standing behind a console with a defiant glare. He hissed words in a partially intelligible mix of Asterian speech and Broken Earth languages. Through a handheld translator Emily had provided, Jamie picked up key phrases. Your world ends soon, unstoppable. With a sneer, Narthis slammed a button on the console. Lights flickered, and an automated voice repeated a countdown in the Asterian tongue. Panicking, Jamie motioned for her tech specialist to examine the console. The specialist's face went white. It was a final protocol that would broadcast a universal signal to release Agent X from the satellites if no override was entered within minutes. They had only one shot, physically disabling the entire system. Jamie locked eyes with Narthis, whose expression seemed triumphant. She lunged forward. They grappled, exchanging swift blows. Narthis was stronger than any human she had faced, but she had the advantage of training and desperation. The console behind them displayed the countdown, each second ticking away the last hope of saving billions of lives. Jamie parried a strike that nearly shattered her forearm guard and managed to drive Narthis backward. Her teammates rushed in to help. Despite the Astorian's formidable strength, they overwhelmed him. With Narthis pinned, the tech specialist hacked into the system, but it was too alien, too locked down. The override wouldn't register in time. In a desperate move, Jamie ordered the demolition charges placed on the console. The specialist set a tight timer. They dove behind cover as an explosion tore the command unit apart. Flames and shards of metal erupted in every direction. The ground shook and fragments of the console rained down. The countdown screen vanished into twisted wreckage. Sirens wailed throughout the compound. Narthis collapsed from his wounds, half buried under debris, still muttering vile curses in his own language. Outside, more blasts rattled the air. It was the rest of Jamie's plan in action, charges they had set on the antenna arrays. The entire base sank into chaos. Seizing the moment, Jamie's team fled. Gunshots echoed behind them as other Astorians realized their fortress was being systematically destroyed. The group reached the perimeter, triggering camouflage smoke to cover their escape. An evac helicopter hovered above a clearing 500 meters away, nearly invisible against the starless sky. Through headsets, Emily reported partial success in jamming the orbital platforms. She could detect disruptions in the signals that once linked them to the base. The danger, however, was not fully averted. The satellites remained a threat until they were definitively neutralized. At least the final broadcast for Agent X had been halted, at least for now. In the hours following the operation, word spread among Allied forces that Jamie's mission had destroyed the Astorians' central coordination site. Across the globe, Earth's militaries launched carefully timed assaults on hidden labs. Some labs were vaporized by precision strikes, others seized intact for further study. Emily orchestrated an electronic warfare campaign to confuse any rogue satellites left in orbit. Meanwhile, advanced jets armed with newly developed high-output lasers were scrambled to hunt down or disable those stealth platforms one by one. The aftermath was a patchwork of scenes. Burning Asterian compounds, stunned and captured alien soldiers, and Earth's troops pushing deeper into territory that had once been hidden or inaccessible. In one final dramatic clash, a team of volunteer pilots engaged an Asterian orbital platform near the edge of Earth's atmosphere. Using a combination of anti-satellite missiles and the lasers, they managed to cripple it. Flaming debris lit up the night sky as it plummeted into the Pacific. Millions witnessed the spectacle from different continents, some in awe, others in terror, fearing the wreckage might still unleash something deadly. But it splashed harmlessly into the ocean after breaking apart. Over the next few days, any remaining Asterian presence on Earth went silent. Scouts reported small pockets of resistance, but these quickly dissolved when cut off from command. The fearsome empire that had once battered Earth was again forced to retreat or face total annihilation on an unexpectedly fierce planet. As dawn broke on the final day of fighting, Jamie stood on a scorched clearing, the soil still smoldering. She watched the skies for signs of more Asterian vessels. None appeared. Over her earpiece, Monroe confirmed that the newly re-established Earth Security Council had voted to create a permanent defense coalition to guard against future threats. Emily's name was mentioned as the lead of a new R&D branch that would further decode Asterian technology, searching for ways to strengthen Earth's defenses. So many people had died or been wounded in these final weeks, but for once the planet's nations seemed to stand united. In the days that followed, celebrations were muted by widespread grief and exhaustion. Those living in already ruined cities faced additional hardship from sabotage or stray orbital debris. Still, the sense of relief was palpable. For Jamie, however, it was difficult to celebrate. She had lost teammates, good people who believed in defending Earth no matter the cost. The global population would heal, but they would need time. She thought back to the final showdown with Narthis, the unwavering conviction in the Astorian's eyes. To him, Earth's defiance must have been a bitter surprise. They had believed humans were too fractured and weak to put up a serious fight. They had underestimated how swiftly humans could innovate under pressure and unite in the face of extinction. By the end of that month, Earth was no longer the same. In many ways, it had become more resilient. The new Earth Alliance, formed from the ashes of the Earth Security Council, began constructing advanced defense grids around the planet. They planned to integrate the scraps of Asterian technology with Earth's own scientific developments, eventually forging a spacefaring defense program that could intercept potential aggressors. Before they reached Earth, Emily Katsura had her lab expanded and funded, employing hundreds of scientists from every corner of the globe. She studied the remains of Agent X in more depth, vowing to develop a countermeasure in case the Astorians ever perfected it. Telltale signs of the alien pathogen lingered in some confiscated vials, prompting the creation of an international biohazard response unit. On a crisp morning, Jamie found herself at a newly built memorial near the base where she and Monroe had planned the crucial missions. Engraved names stretched across polished granite, representing those who had fallen in both the initial invasion 2 years ago and the renewed conflict they had just survived. She ran her fingers over the etched letters of her lost comrades, remembering their laughter, their fear, and their unwavering commitment. Wind rustled through a row of flags, no longer simply national flags, but the banner of the Earth Alliance, symbolizing a unity that had been painfully slow to achieve. In the following weeks, glimpses of a new age emerged. With the Asterian threat receding, humans turned not only to reconstruction, but also to progress. Engineers and architects brainstormed city designs that combined sustainability with hidden defenses should an enemy strike once more. Farmers learned ways to replenish nutrient-depleted soil more efficiently, some of which involved studied modifications gleaned from Asterian tech. In large research facilities, vessels for deep space exploration began to take shape, laying the groundwork for an era where Earth might not only defend itself, but also venture beyond the solar system with confidence. The old cynicism that had dogged international affairs began to crack, replaced by cautious optimism that maybe, just maybe, humanity had learned to stand together. For Jamie, the war's conclusion marked a personal turning point. She had always been a soldier, driven by duty. Now, she found her role expanding into diplomacy and strategic planning. She received an invitation to join a high-level Earth Alliance Council, partly out of respect for her leadership in the field and partly because of her unyielding commitment to global cooperation. Though she accepted, she never forgot the raw memories of the battlefield. Some nights, she dreamed of the day her team had confronted Narthis in that hidden fortress, the suffocating fear that any mistake could doom billions. Yet each morning, she rose determined to help shape a future where humanity would not be caught unprepared again. Throughout the next months, scattered Asterian outposts were discovered in remote jungles and deserts, apparently abandoned. Equipment was seized for study, revealing that the Astorians had developed multiple contingency plans. Some labs contained partial clones of Earth fauna spliced with Astorian genetic material, perhaps experiments in terraforming or infiltration. Others held half-finished star charts, possibly indicating new invasion routes or parallel offensives. Each discovery served as a stark reminder that the fight for Earth's survival might be ongoing, even if the largest immediate threat had passed. Despite the uneasy feeling that the Astorians could one day return with an even bigger armada, people across the globe clung to hope. Streets filled again with the sounds of markets and daily life. Children played in schoolyards that had once been turned into bomb shelters, and nations that had long been at odds found themselves cooperating on trade and defense. In many respects, the Astorian attempts to conquer Earth had been the catalyst that forced humanity to finally put aside petty rivalries. One late afternoon, Jamie took a walk along the same gravel road where she had stood months ago, pondering the possibility of the Astorians' return. This time, the farmland showed signs of revival. Young crops swayed in the breeze, and a handful of farmers patched up an old wind turbine. Smoke curled from the chimneys of reconstructed homes, the silhouettes of daily life returning. She paused to watch a flock of birds swirl overhead, momentarily lost in the dance of wings against the setting sun. When her phone buzzed, it was Monroe. The Earth Alliance had scheduled a major ceremony, and they wanted her to speak about how the world had changed since the day she discovered that suspicious radar reading. As she listened to Monroe's instructions, she recalled the exact moment she had realized the Astorians were still on Earth. The fleeting signals on the radar screen, dismissed by so many, but a clarion call to her. They had all thought the fight was over. That was the greatest mistake, underestimating not just the Astorians' persistence, but also humanity's capacity to respond. She ended the call, her eyes drifting to the horizon. There are no signs of alien warships, only clouds tinged with orange and red. The wind carried the scent of farmland on the mend. Slowly, she made her way back to her vehicle, pondering the speech she would give. It would be honest. She would speak of the heroic sacrifices, the heartbreak of loss, the fractures that still remained in international alliances, and the promise that a unified Earth held. Above all, she would emphasize that humanity had confronted the same enemy twice. The first time, they had won by a combination of chance and bravery, not truly understanding their foe. The second time, the world had stepped up, mobilizing their collective courage and ingenuity. No, the Astorians would never again find Earth so easily taken. If they ever returned, they would face an even stronger, more cooperative species, one that had harnessed the best qualities of its people: resilience, teamwork, and the will to never surrender. Jamie, gazing at the twilight sky, felt a surge of quiet pride. Perhaps the Astorians in their arrogance had planted the seeds of their own downfall. They had left just enough technology behind for Earth scientists to study and adopt. They had lit a fire under humanity's leaders, forcing them to truly cooperate for once. And most of all, they had shown Jamie and everyone else that survival sometimes demanded more than weapons and numbers. It required the sheer determination to become more than what you were. She climbed into her vehicle, the engine rumbling to life. The beams from the headlights illuminated a path forward, turning the gravel into a golden ribbon. As she drove, she watched the fields roll past, thinking of how quickly everything could be torn away if vigilance lapsed. This planet, she thought, belongs to all who live on it. The Astorians might have returned, but they failed because they underestimated humanity's heart and mind. In the future, Earth would no longer be caught off guard. After all, they had proven they could prevail once they truly got serious.